Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
This Video Global Print column, dear viewer, is coming to you a couple of days after my text column was published on the Print website. And this gives me the opportunity to discuss a little bit more about what's going on in the Naya Afghanistan. You know that a new Taliban government has come to power. But before I talk more about this, the ramifications, the impact this will have on India and indeed the world community, I'd like to make an appeal to you. Please do subscribe, pay just a little bit. It's only rupees 159. Click on the join button and become a subscriber. And you will get an array of benefits that non-subscribers don't have. The links to subscribe are in the description of this video, both for an international audience as well as for a domestic one. So in my Global Print video column this week, I talk about the Naya Afghanistan, the new Taliban government in power. And I'm going to make 4 points. The first is that this new Taliban government now from Kabul, you hear repeatedly again and again that this is an acting or an interim government. And that's because there's been a lot of criticism about this new government. So why has there been so much criticism? So let's just take a look at some of the features. The first is that there are no women in this government. Now, you can argue, and indeed a lot of people are arguing, that it's not as if women are represented in every, even democratically elected government in the entire world. In India, for example, women are only 11% in the entire parliament, and this is including the ruling party, the BJP, as well as in the opposition. And in the government itself, also, there aren't that many women. So if the Taliban, which is a very, very conservative group, if they don't have women, what's the big deal? Now, I will leave that to you decide whether it's a big deal or not, but that's one of the big things that stand out. The second is that it does have a couple of ethnic groups represented. The military chief, for example, is a Tajik, Mullah Fasihuddin, and he is the one who won the battle for Panchi, and we will talk about this a little bit more later. But the third point is that it has no Shia in this government. So now the Taliban, which are predominantly Sunni Pashtun, if they want to attract people of all Islamic religious denominations, then it might be a good idea for them to have a much more diverse grouping. But like I said again, this is from Kabul. You hear that this is just an interim government and things could change. Meanwhile, let us take a look at the most powerful players in this government. The first is the acting Prime Minister, Mullah Hassan Akhund. Now, Mr. Akhund, in the first incarnation of the Taliban government from 1996 to 2001, played a very important role. And he was amongst those who voted in favor of the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas. Now, some of you may know that Bamiyan is a province in the heart of Afghanistan. I've been there. It's a spectacular sight. You have these barren mountains and the Buddhas. It's a 2,000-year-old Buddha. Standing statues were carved into the rock face. So when the Taliban first came to power, one of the first things they did was to blast those Buddhas. They weren't doing any harm to anybody, but because they are such an extremist, hardline Islamic government then and now, as we see, the first thing they did is that they said that Buddhism is antagonistic and anathema to Islam, which of course we know is not true. But so the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas took place, and Mullah Hassan Akhund was at the forefront of that destruction. The second interesting player is Sirajudin Haqqani of the Haqqani network. He's a very, very powerful member of the Haqqani network. And we know that the Haqqani network, an anti-India organization, several Indians have been killed, and those killings have been sourced to the Haqqanis. An Indian defense attaché as well as an Indian diplomat in the embassy in 2008 were killed in a bomb blast that was carried out by the Haqqani network. Subsequently, in 2009 and 2012 as well, Indians again were targeted by the Haqqanis. So this man, Sirajudin Haqqani, is the new interior minister of Afghanistan. Mullah Baradar, we all know, he's been the face of the political negotiating team of the Taliban for the last couple of years. He's a well-known face. Sher Abbas Muhammad Stanigzai. Now, in one of my earlier columns, I had the opportunity to discuss Mr. Stanigzai's past a little bit with you. He graduated from the Indian Military Academy, and subsequently, we saw only a couple of weeks ago in Doha, Mr. Stanigzai came to the Indian Embassy in Doha, in Qatar, and met the Indian ambassador, Mr. Deepak Mittal. But Mr. Stanigzai, interestingly, has been relegated to the relatively junior and perhaps not that powerful role of a deputy foreign minister. Now, Mullah Yaqub, which is the fifth name that comes to mind, he's the son of Mullah Omar, the founder of the Taliban. And Mr. Yaqub is the new defense minister of Afghanistan. So what does this show to you? To me, it shows that the stamp of the Pakistani military and ISI is all over it. And you know that Faiz Hamid, the director of the Pakistani ISI, the Pakistani intelligence agency, was in Kabul just before the weekend, so about a week or so ago, and he had obviously come to meet the new government. This is before this new government was announced. So you can argue, what was Mr. Faiz Hamid doing in Kabul? He was photographed in the lobby of the Serena Hotel, which again is a very lovely hotel in Kabul. So Mr. Hamid photographed along with other Pakistani diplomats. Now, there are two reasons why Faiz Hamid was believed to be in Kabul. The first is that there were some tensions within the Taliban, within the hardline factions, the Haqqanis, the more moderate factions believed to be Mullah Baradar and Stanigzai. And he was there to sort out these tensions between all of them. So the stamp of the Pakistani military establishment and the ISI is firmly on the new government, as we can see. And the second reason why Faiz Hamid was in Kabul was allegedly to plan and execute Operation Panchi. So last weekend, the Panchiris, the only holdout against the Taliban, subsequently they were attacked led by the Taliban commander, Mullah Fasihuddin. He has since been made the military chief of the Taliban in the new government. So the Panchiris had to give in. That resistance crumbled, and the last holdout against the Taliban fell. So now the Taliban rule over all of Afghanistan is complete. They are powerful and they are here to stay. I cannot not talk about the death of Fahim Dashty in that operation in which the Taliban took Panchi. Fahim Dashty was a journalist, a good friend of mine, and when the Taliban took Kabul on the 15th of August, Fahim, along with several other people, Amrullah Saleh, the former first vice president of the Ashraf Ghani government, as well as Ahmad Massoud, the son of the legendary commander Massoud, they left Kabul and went to Panjshir. Now, Panjshir is one of those places in Afghanistan which has a lot of sort of mystery as well as stories of valor that are associated with. And most importantly, it is associated with Ahmad Shah Massoud, the legendary fighter who never gave in, neither to the Soviets nor to the Taliban. And in 2001, on the 9th of September, 2 days before the September 11 attacks in the US, Ahmad Shah Massoud was assassinated by two Al-Qaeda members posing as Moroccan journalists. They said they had come to interview Ahmad Shah Massoud. He had been giving interviews to international organizations, including to Indian journalists, and he was assassinated. There was a bomb placed inside the camera that ostensibly these two journalists were using to interview Ahmad Shah Massoud. And after the fall of Panjshir, so in this battle that the Panjshiris wanted to fight against the Taliban, it was always going to be a losing battle. But Fahim Dashty, Amrullah Saleh, and Ahmad Massoud nevertheless left Kabul to go to Panjshir. Unfortunately, a few days ago, Fahim Dashty lost his life. He was a journalist, but he exchanged his pen for the metaphorical sword. I'm not sure he picked up a gun. But he was there. He was a spokesperson for the northern resistance. And it's with deep regret that I have to say here that he is no more with us. We don't know about the whereabouts of Amrullah Saleh and Ahmed Massoud. We don't know whether they're still in the Panchi or whether they have left for other countries. Perhaps they are no longer there because otherwise they would have been hunted down by the Taliban. And that's a good decision that they both made to fight another day. Now, subsequently, over the last couple of days, we've seen videos that the grave of Ahmed Shah Massoud has been desecrated by the Taliban. Now, this is not the promise that the Taliban came with when they came to power. They promised to rule in the name of all Afghans. But this is certainly not what's happening. There is revenge that is taking place in the Naya Afghanistan. So the point that I made earlier, the stamp of the Pakistan military establishment and the ISI all over the new Taliban government. The third point that I'm making here is that China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, Qatar have kept their embassies open in the new Afghanistan. We've seen how in a day or so ago, how the Chinese have sent $31 million worth of humanitarian goods. Now, what is interesting is that neither China nor Russia have still not recognized the Taliban government in power. The Russians, for example, are saying that while they will send their ambassador in Kabul, Dmitry Shirnov, to the inauguration ceremony, and I imagine that all the ambassadors who have their embassies open in Kabul will also attend the inaugural. The fact remains that Russia, for example, has still not recognized the government in Kabul. Now, the reason that the Russians have not recognized this is ostensibly because the Russians are saying that although they are willing to accept the reality on the ground, but they still want to wait to see whether the Taliban means what it says, which means that the Russians are very worried, deeply worried about terrorism, terrorist groups that infiltrate into the Central Asian states and therefore into Russia. And we know that a lot of the Russian provinces, especially in the south, are predominantly Muslim. So they don't want Islamic insurgents to creep into their country and to create havoc and mayhem. And the second thing the Russians are worried about is opium and narcotics, because that has been very, very harmful to people in their country. So some differences may still emerge even amongst those countries that still have their embassies open inside in Kabul. Iran, for example, has given a very critical statement of the fall of Panchi, of the taking of Panchi, and said that, and they've actually called it an invasion. So we will wait and see over the next few days, weeks, months, how this pans out. Although at the United Nations in a week or so, the accreditation committee is going to meet, and they will then look at the case of Afghanistan. Of course, the ruling party, the Taliban, will say that they are the ones who want to be accredited. But again, the jury is out and we'll see what happens there. So speaking of the United Nations, it seems as if the UN is also slowly coming to terms with what's going on in Afghanistan. The head of the UN relief organization, Martin Griffiths, was in Kabul a few days ago. He met Mullah Baradar. And what is interesting to note is that the Afghanistan flag of the Islamic Republic, not the flag of the Taliban, not the flag of the Islamic Emirate, but the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan flag was in place when Mr. Griffiths met the Taliban leader, Mullah Baradar. On the 12th and 13th of September, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also called for a meeting of all the big players in Afghanistan, and the discussions on humanitarian aid and what kind of help Afghanistan needs desperately, that is going to be discussed. So I'm going to leave it here for now, dear viewer, but just to remind you, do pay just a little bit, rupees 159 only. Click on the join button, subscribe to The Print, and you will get this array of benefits, I promise you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and do let me know what you think about it.